Look, I need you to understand something right from the start. My name is Lieutenant Vorn Kelaxis of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps, and I have never, not once in my 7 cycles of service, been embarrassed. Not when I accidentally activated a waste disposal unit during a formal dinner with the Archon of Playon 5. Not when my translator malfunctioned, and I proposed marriage instead of trade negotiations to an ambassador who had 12 husbands already. Never, until I met her. But we are getting ahead of ourselves here, are we not? Let me back up a bit, set the scene properly, because this story, this ridiculous, humiliating, absolutely unforgettable story, it begins like most disasters do, with confidence, with swagger, with the kind of certainty that makes the universe laugh and prepare popcorn. The humans had just joined the Galactic Council 3 months prior. 3 months. They strutted in with their coffee addiction and their inability to pronounce half our names correctly and their weird obsession with putting cheese on everything, and suddenly they were everywhere. Every station, every diplomatic function, every trade negotiation. You could not avoid them if you tried. Not that anyone wanted to avoid them, mind you. Because here is the thing about humans that nobody told us, that none of the preliminary reports mentioned, that came as a complete and utter shock to every species in the Council. They are attractive, alarmingly so, disturbingly so, in ways that make absolutely no biological sense whatsoever. My species, the Keltar, we are tall, we are elegant, we have skin that shifts through 17 different shades of blue depending on our mood and the lighting. Our bone structure is considered the aesthetic standard across 4 galaxies. When a Keltar walks into a room, other species notice. They admire, they wish they had our symmetry, our grace, our perfectly proportioned cranial ridges. Then a human shows up and somehow, everyone is looking at them instead. It is infuriating. So when I got assigned to the new human embassy on Station Cree 14, I will admit I had certain expectations. I had seen the humans at formal events, noticed how they moved, how they laughed too loudly at their own jokes, how they seemed utterly unaware of proper social hierarchies. I had also noticed that most of them, when approached correctly, were remarkably easy to charm. A compliment here, a subtle display of status there, an invitation to view my quarters, which happened to have the best view of the station's botanical gardens. Simple, effective, foolproof, or so I thought. Her name was Commander Eliza Raines, and she was the head of human security operations for the entire station, which I did not know when I first saw her in the station commissary, standing in line for what humans call a breakfast burrito, which is apparently a tortilla wrapped around chaos and held together by hope. She was tall for a human, maybe 1.7 meters, with dark skin that seemed to absorb light and hair pulled back in a style that humans call no-nonsense. She wore the standard human military uniform, which fit her in ways that made my chromatophores shift involuntarily to a shade of blue I was not entirely proud of. I approached, casually, confidently, the way I had approached dozens of diplomatic encounters before, the way I had been trained. "Excuse me," I said, making sure my translator was set to the smooth, pleasant tone that worked so well with most species. "I could not help but notice you are new to the station, Lieutenant Vorn Kelaxis, Diplomatic Corps. Welcome to Cree 14. She glanced at me, just glanced. One quick look that lasted maybe 2 seconds, then she turned back to the food line, which had moved forward approximately 1 human step. "Thanks," she said. That was it. 1 word. Not rude, not cold, just, thanks, like I had held a door open for her, or told her the time. My training kicked in. Humans appreciate persistence, the files said. They value confidence and direct communication. Do not be deterred by initial disinterest. I was wondering, I continued, moving to keep pace with her as the line advanced, if you might allow me to show you around the station? There are several locations that are not included in the standard orientation, places where one can truly appreciate the architectural magnificence of Keltar design. "I have been on the station for 6 weeks, she said, still not looking at me. "I probably know it better than you do at this point." 6 weeks? That was impossible. I had been monitoring new arrivals specifically to meet interesting people. How had I missed her? Then perhaps you would be interested in learning about Keltar culture? I would be honored to share some of our philosophical traditions over dinner. I know an excellent restaurant on the promenade level, very exclusive, with a waiting list of at least 3 cycles. She reached the front of the line, ordered something that made the server's eyes widen with alarm, then finally turned to face me fully. "Let me stop you right there," she said, and her voice had this quality to it, this particular tone that I would later recognize as the sound of professional patience wearing extremely thin. "Are you trying to ask me out?" "I am attempting to facilitate cross-cultural exchange through social interaction," I said, which was technically accurate and sounded much better than "yes, obviously, have you seen yourself?" She looked at me for a long moment, long enough that I started to wonder if human eye contact had some significance I had not been briefed on, long enough that the server handed her the breakfast burrito, which she took without breaking our gaze, long enough that 3 other people in line started watching us with interest. Then she smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that predators make before they pounce. The kind of smile that says, "I am about to enjoy this far more than you will." "Okay," she said. "Sure, let us do that. But first I need you to answer one question for me." "Of course," I said, relieved. Questions I could handle. Questions were part of every diplomatic exchange. I was excellent at questions. "What is my rank?" I blinked. All 4 of my eyes, one after another. My rank," she repeated, still smiling, that terrible smile. "You introduced yourself as Lieutenant. You heard me being addressed as Commander in the briefing yesterday. That briefing you attended, where I sat 3 seats away from you. So tell me, Lieutenant, what is my rank?" "Yesterday's briefing." "Yesterday's? Oh no. Oh no, no, no. You are a commander," I said slowly, feeling my chromatophores shifting to a shade of blue that indicated deep mortification. "That is correct. And what does that mean, in terms of our relative positions in the chain of command?" "It means you outrank me, significantly." Gold star for the lieutenant. Now, follow-up question. Did you think even for a moment about checking my rank before you decided to try your smooth-talking routine? Or did you just see a woman alone in a cafeteria line and think, "Oh, perfect, an opportunity"? Several humans in the nearby tables had stopped eating. One of them had their communication device out, possibly recording. This was becoming a spectacle, and spectacles were very, very bad for diplomatic careers. "I apologize, Commander," I said, trying to salvage something from this disaster. "I meant no disrespect. It was an oversight." "An oversight," she repeated, nodding slowly. "Right. Here is what we are going to do, Lieutenant. You are going to take your oversight, and your dinner invitation, and your exclusive restaurant with the 3-cycle waiting list, and you are going to walk away. Then you are going to think very carefully about whether you want to be the kind of officer who hits on people in his chain of command. Or alternatively, the kind of officer who assumes every woman he sees is available for his cultural exchange program. Does that sound reasonable?" "Yes, Commander. Extremely reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. Wonderful. I am so glad we had this conversation." She picked up her tray, balanced it in one hand with the kind of casual competence that suggested she could probably juggle 3 of them while running an obstacle course, and walked away. I stood there, in the middle of the commissary, with approximately 47 beings from 12 different species watching me. My chromatophores had shifted to a shade of blue that my people use specifically for funerals. A human male at the nearest table leaned over to his companion, not even trying to lower his voice. "Dude just got absolutely destroyed." "She did not even raise her voice," his companion replied, sounding impressed. "That was surgical." They were right. It was surgical. It was precise. It was the kind of complete and total shutdown that leaves no room for argument, no possibility of comeback, no hope whatsoever. And somehow that was not even the worst part. The worst part came later that afternoon. When I discovered that Commander Eliza Raines was not just any security officer. Oh no, that would have been too simple, too merciful. The universe, in its infinite sense of humor, had decided that I needed a more comprehensive lesson in humiliation. She was Admiral Marcus Trent's daughter. Admiral Marcus Trent, the human who had personally negotiated the terms of Earth's entry into the Galactic Council. The human who had stared down the entire assembly and refused to back down on 3 separate treaty clauses that everyone said were non-negotiable. The human who, according to station gossip, once arm-wrestled a Kryn battlemaster for fun, and won. His daughter. I found this out because my superior, Ambassador Thex, called me into her office exactly 2 hours after the Commissary incident. She did not look happy. Ambassador Thex rarely looked happy. Her species had facial features that naturally settled into expressions of profound disappointment. But this was something beyond her usual demeanor. This was personal. "Lieutenant Kelaxis," she said, her 4 hands folded neatly on her desk in a way that suggested she was physically restraining herself from using them to strangle me. "Would you care to explain why I have received 3 separate communications about your behavior this morning?" "I can explain," I started, but she held up one hand. "That was rhetorical, Lieutenant. I do not actually want to hear your explanation, because I have already watched the video." "Yes, there is video. Multiple angles. Someone has already set it to music and posted it on the station's social network. You have become, in human terminology, a meme." "A meme?" I did not know what that was, but it sounded terminal. "Ambassador, I sincerely apologize. I was unaware of Commander Raines's position, and "You were unaware," the case interrupted, "because you did not bother to check. You saw an attractive human female and your brain apparently shut down all higher functions. Do you understand how this reflects on our entire diplomatic mission? Do you comprehend the position you have put us in?" "Yes, Ambassador. I do not think you do. Let me clarify. We are attempting to establish strong relationships with the human delegation. We are trying to prove that the Keltar are sophisticated, professional, worthy of the trust they are placing in us as intermediaries with the rest of the Council. And then you, Lieutenant, you decide to prove every stereotype about young male officers who think the universe revolves around their mating displays." Each word landed like a physical blow. My chromatophores had given up entirely and settled on a dull grey that probably made me look like a corpse. "Furthermore," Thex continued, clearly warming to her subject, "you did this to Admiral Trent's daughter, his only daughter, the human he is notoriously, legendarily protective of, the human who, I am told, once broke her arm during combat training and did not tell her father for 3 days because she knew he would overreact. That Commander Raines." "I did not know," I said weakly. "Obviously, because if you had known, if you had done even basic research, if you had demonstrated the most minimal level of competence expected of a diplomatic officer, you would have run in the opposite direction. But you did not. So now I have to do damage control." "Do you know what damage control means, Lieutenant?" "Fixing the situation. It means I have to have dinner with Admiral Trent tonight and convince him that you are merely an idiot, not a predator. It means I have to assure him that our diplomatic mission takes these matters seriously. It means I have to promise that you will not, under any circumstances, go anywhere near his daughter again." "That seems reasonable," I said. "It is extremely reasonable. It is the most reasonable thing in the galaxy. And yet here we are, having this conversation, because you could not keep your courtship displays in your quarters." There was a long silence. Outside Thex's office, I could hear the normal sounds of the embassy. People working, communicating, doing their jobs with competence and professionalism, all the things I was apparently incapable of. "Am I being reassigned?" I asked finally. The side sighed, a long exhausted sound. "No. Surprisingly no. Do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because Commander Raines herself specifically requested that we not take any action against you," she said, and I quote, "He was just being a dumbass, not malicious, no harm done. I have dealt with worse at every posting." "Do you understand what that means, Lieutenant? That she is merciful? It means she has dealt with this so many times, from so many different species and individuals, that your attempt did not even register as significant. You were so unremarkable in your idiocy that she considered it not worth pursuing. I am not sure whether that should make you feel better or worse." "Worse? Definitely worse. You are confined to the embassy for the next 2 weeks, Thex continued. You will complete additional training on human cultural protocols, military hierarchy, and professional boundaries. You will write a formal apology to Commander Raines, which I will review before it is sent. And you will never, ever speak of this incident again unless directly asked. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Ambassador. Good. Now get out of my office before I change my mind and ship you back to the homeworld in a cargo container." I left, quickly. My chromatophores were doing things I did not even know were possible, cycling through colors that probably violated several laws of physics. The next 2 weeks were, without exaggeration, the longest of my life. I completed the training modules, which were extensive and humbling. I learned that humans have something called fraternization regulations that explicitly prohibit romantic or sexual relationships between officers of different ranks. I learned that human military culture takes these regulations very seriously. I learned that what I had done was not just socially awkward, it was potentially career-ending for both parties if it had gone differently. I also learned, through channels I will not disclose, that the video of my public humiliation had been viewed approximately 47,000 times across the station's network. Someone had added subtitles in 6 different languages. Someone else had created a remix where my voice was auto-tuned. A Vorn comedy troupe had apparently incorporated a reenactment into their latest show. I was famous. For all the wrong reasons. The apology letter took me 4 days to write. Every version I drafted sounded either too formal, too casual, too defensive, or too pathetic. Finally, in desperation, I showed a draft to Junior Attaché Mira, a human who worked in our communications department. She read it, winced, and said, "This is terrible." "I know. No, I mean really terrible. You sound like a corporation apologizing for a data breach. Here, let me help." She helped. The final version was 3 paragraphs. Short, direct, taking full responsibility without making excuses or asking for forgiveness. Acknowledging that I had been unprofessional and that Commander Raines had been more than gracious in her response. I sent it. Then I waited. 3 days later, I received a reply. It was even shorter than my apology. Apology accepted. Do better next time. Commander Raines. 4 words. Well, 6 if you count her name and rank. That was it. No lecture, no anger, no indication that she had given the incident any additional thought whatsoever. It was absolutely devastating, because it meant she had moved on. Completely. While I was spiraling in embarrassment and shame and obsessive review of everything I had done wrong, she had simply filed the entire incident away under minor annoyances and continued with her life. The realization that I was utterly forgettable was somehow worse than being memorable for the wrong reasons. On the 16th day, my confinement ended. I ventured out of the embassy carefully, half expecting to be recognized and mocked by everyone I encountered. But station life had moved on. There were new scandals, new entertainment, new things to gossip about. My humiliation had already been replaced in the collective consciousness, except, apparently, in the human military circles. I discovered this when I went to the observation deck, my favorite spot on the station, a place where you could see 3 different star systems simultaneously through the massive viewing ports. It was usually quiet, contemplative, perfect for someone trying to rebuild their shattered dignity. Commander Raines was there. Of course she was, because the universe had not finished teaching me lessons yet. She was alone, standing at the viewing port with a data pad in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. She seemed completely absorbed in whatever she was reading, oblivious to my presence. I could leave, should leave. That was the smart, sensible, survival-oriented choice. Turn around, walk away, find literally anywhere else to be. But I am Keltar. We do not flee. We do not hide. And I had spent 2 weeks learning about human concepts like facing your mistakes and growth through discomfort. So I walked forward, not approaching her, just moving to a viewing port several meters away, far enough to be respectful, close enough to acknowledge her presence if she chose to acknowledge mine. She glanced over. For one horrible second, I thought she did not recognize me. Then she nodded, one quick gesture that humans use for casual greeting. "Lieutenant." "Commander?" Silence. Long, heavy silence filled only with the ambient hum of the station's environmental systems. Then she did something completely unexpected. She laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not mocking or vindictive. A genuine laugh, the kind that comes from real amusement. "You know," she said, still looking out at the stars. "My father wanted to file a formal complaint. I had to talk him down. Told him you were young and stupid, not dangerous. He said those 2 things are not mutually exclusive. I told him I was pretty sure you learned your lesson." "I did," I said quickly. "Absolutely, comprehensively, never again." "Good, because for what it is worth, you are not the worst. Last station I was posted at, a Vorn commander actually proposed marriage, during a staff meeting, in front of his own wife. That seems significantly worse." It was significantly worse, made for a very awkward rest of the meeting. She took a sip of her coffee, made a face like it had gone cold, then drank it anyway because apparently humans are capable of consuming beverages at any temperature. "Look, I know I came down pretty hard on you. The thing is, that happens a lot, more than you probably realize, and most of the time being polite about it just encourages more attempts, so I have learned to be direct." "You were very direct." "Yeah, well, it works. You have not bothered me since." "I am currently terrified of you," I admitted. She laughed again. "Good. Fear is healthy, keeps people alert. But listen, no hard feelings, okay? You were inappropriate," I corrected you. "You apologized, We move on. That is how adults handle things. Is that how humans handle things? It is how I handle things. Some humans would have made it into a 3-month drama with meetings and reports and formal inquiries. I prefer efficiency. We stood there for a while longer, both watching the stars. It was, despite everything, almost comfortable. Finally, she pushed away from the viewing port. I should get back. Reports to file, protocols to review, the exciting life of a security officer. She started to walk past me, then paused. Hey, Kelaxis? Yes, Commander? Next time you want to ask someone out, maybe check their rank first. Just a suggestion. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with the stars and the lingering smell of terrible coffee and the distinct impression that I had just been given a gift I did not entirely deserve. Forgiveness, understanding, a second chance. Humans, I decided, were far more complicated than any training manual suggested. They were tough, yes, direct, absolutely, but also fair, also capable of mercy, also willing to move past mistakes without holding eternal grudges. My chromatophores shifted to a shade of blue that indicated tentative optimism. Maybe, just maybe, I could learn to be worthy of working alongside them after all. And maybe, just maybe, I had learned the most important lesson of all. That respect is not something you display to impress someone. It is something you demonstrate through your actions, your attention, your willingness to see people as they actually are, rather than as you want them to be. It only took complete humiliation to figure that out. I would call that a bargain.